Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you the latest discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact on this world. This podcast is all about empowering us all, navigating life's twists and turns, and stepping into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining me on this episode of the Inspired Podcast. Today, I have a fantastic guest I'm so excited to introduce you to. Raj Gurn is a multi-award-winning serial entrepreneur, media personality, author, and double certified confidence coach with over 25 years of experience working with Fortune 500 brands and A-list personalities through her multimedia company, Anokhi, which she founded in 2002. She's also the founder of the Open Chest Confidence Academy, which she founded in 2020 to help educate and resource women to build authentic brands by bridging the gap that exists on different levels between their competence and confidence through coaching, consulting, courses, and events. And additionally, she's the co-owner of the Glam Temple Med Spa that launched in 2023, a real estate investor in various single-family homes in Canada and in Mexico, and an early-stage investor in the world's first space-certified beauty and wellness brand, Ready, Set, Jet. Raj happily lives in Toronto with her son, dog, 3 cats, and fish, and 100 plants. And she's at the heart, first and foremost, a nurturer. And Raj, I'm so happy that you were able to join me today. All of your experience, all of your many multi-layered experiences fit so well, I think, with this show and our audience. And we really appreciate you being here and to tell your story to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and blessed. I'm very much looking forward to, an insightful conversation. And I really hope that, what we talk about is going to land with your audience.
Yeah, me too. I have no doubt that it will. And let's start by unpacking a bit of your story, if you can, for us, of where you're from, how you kind of got to this place. You truly are a serial entrepreneur, and that I'm sure your mind doesn't stop, with ideas of new businesses that you could start. So, when did you discover that about yourself? What was give us a little bit of a picture into what your life has been like.
That's such an enormous question. And I think that the best way for me to answer that is, if you haven't already guessed, I am British. I was born and brought up in England. And I was brought up by South Asian parents who were themselves immigrants from India in the 60s. So I grew up in 1970s and 80s United Kingdom. And the landscape at that time there was very monochromatic. You were either white or black. There was no in between. So, me being brown, the myriad of rich kind of, background that I came from, a society that is over 5,000 years old, scriptures going back that time. I really was brought up in a very, very heavily traditional background. But the dichotomy in my upbringing was that, in the home, I was very much brought up as a South Asian girl. Outside the home, in the school environment, growing up in, pop cultural society of those times, I was very kind of confused about who I was and who I needed to be, because the narrative in the home and outside of the home didn't match. There were very much conflicting ideologies, because in the home, there was a very stringent ideology from my culture of who I needed to be as a woman. And then there was this whole other, idea of what a woman could be outside of the home. So it was that dichotomy that kind of, brought me into kind of trying to figure out who I needed to be. The big ultimate question we have as humans, right? Who am I? Why am I here? What is the magic that I'm supposed to bring into this world? And am I living that, right?
So, I mean, first of all, how, as a young woman with these two very different messages, integrating them often probably on the same day. You go to school, you get these messages, you observe the young women around you, their belief system, you come home, totally different expectation. How did you, growing up, were there moments that you rebelled from that? Were there times where you just were left confused about how did you process that emotionally when you're a young person?
That's such a good question because there's just so many micro chapters that come about as we grow through, our infant years to puberty to then young adulthood, regardless of cultural background, right? Like we all know this. We all have that struggle.
Yeah.
In my case, the added struggle was that I had too much coming at me. Like, there was just too many potential narratives that I could be, because I was exposed to so many. But there was only one that I was allowed to be, which was, the girl that was being reared to get married.
Yeah.
So I need to know how to cook, how to look after myself. There was a lot of nurturing skills that were learned because, in my culture and a lot of cultures that come from more ancient times, which pretty much is all of them except the West, right?
Yeah. But we
We've
borrow
got,
a lot of those other
yeah.
patriarchal.
And you come from a background, like we all come from a background that inherently comes from an ancient culture of sorts. We're
Right.
sitting here in North America, thinking that we are in this kind of new world, but we're really not, because what makes us who we are, the DNA of who we are, comes from many ancient cultures, right?
Yep.
And I digress because I was answering your question and I've kind of forgotten
Sorry.
what
That was
question you
my
were
fault.
asking. No, it wasn't at all.
No,
Please.
so I guess as a young person emotionally navigating that, right? Because your frontal
Yes.
lobe is not fully formed yet. So your monkey brain might be at work. Who knows? I mean, this is what we do when we're and teenagers are teenagers. So yeah, how did that play out in your family?
So I guess it was really, it was a huge battle. There was an internal battle within me as to, okay, this is the version of who I'm meant to be. And the ultimate goal was to marry someone who could take care of me. So someone that was very well established career wise, the families aligned, our value systems aligned, all the things that, Western culture doesn't tell you is why you should get married, because Western culture is more romanticized. It's about the romance and the love. And those are the things that are supposed to carry you through a marriage. Whereas in my culture, what's supposed to carry you through a marriage are, like-minded upbringing and value systems and the same kind of socio-economic background, more the practical things that really actually, if I look back over, my life, are the things that I feel should be in place when you think about getting married. But without the piece of, the love, I feel doing those practical things are very difficult to do because you need to anchor all of those practical things in something that is, more integrated with, why am I fighting for this life? Because, the love that I have for this person, the respect that I have for this person, and the other way round is what's going to carry me through the practicality of life and the hardships of life and the successes that, as an island, do you really want to be successful on your own, right? Do you want to share that with someone?
Right. So do you feel in hindsight looking back that there are ways that this kind of Western culture could teach your Eastern roots and your Eastern roots could teach the West? Like, did you find yourself in a place of like embracing them both from a standpoint of maybe each has something to learn from one another?
That's such a great question, Andrea. And yes, my short answer to that is yes, because there's only so long you can keep fighting the battle without getting exhausted and thinking to yourself, I'm not really getting to anything that is giving me peace and contentment and allowing me to feel like, I'm actually living a life rather than life living me, which is a
Yes.
struggle we all have, right? And
Right.
that pivotal point happened for me when I actually became a mother. So here I am living the life that I'm meant to live according to my culture and being, something that belonged to someone else. Because, I always was either a daughter, a sister, a wife, or a mother. But when I became the mother is when my eyes opened and I realized that how am I supposed to nurture this child without the experience of life, without having a perspective that I can
Mm,
teach this child? Because even though I hadn't figured out when I was growing up how to marry the two worlds and the two ideologies and the two perspectives, I'm now faced with having to do that for someone else. And it's almost like you need to be able to be faced with that kind of a problem in order to feel that, hang on a minute, I need to deal with this, because what's a greater love than the love of a mother for their child? Like, you may not love yourself as much as you could love your child, right? And I feel through that experience, I started to ask the questions that we ask as humans, as women,
sure.
even
I
as
mean,
men.
it makes sense. You're also seeing it through the eyes of a child. There's something about, I mean, my children were they were very young. I remember often feeling like they were almost a mirror in front of me, which I didn't always love, by the way, but but there's something to be said about the way they're reacting to me and I'm reacting to them, and I'm also seeing them experience the world for the first time from this childlike perspective that doesn't have any imprinted, opinions about culture and color of your skin and where you live and, religious tradition, but really is just that childlike and innocent space, which I think is an opportunity for all of us as parents really to lean in and learn from that if we can, but it's hard because
No, it is. But you
often
know
it's a
what you
mirror.
said there? What you said there, Andrea, I think is very, very important to kind of think about. And that is all those things that you haven't dealt with comes as a mirror to you when you are raising your own kids, right? So
Yes.
so you may not have dealt with them. It's almost like a gift from the universe that you didn't deal with these things. Hang on a minute, Raj, you didn't deal with these things, but you're going to have to deal with it now, because here you have a child that's going to face those same things. So do you want that child to have to go through it the hard way, the way you did? Or do you want to be able to help nurture their path so that it'll be easier for them, even though their path is their destiny and they get to make their decisions, right?
Yes, 100%. And I wish I was wiser, like in everything you just said. And I understand it now in a way that I didn't understand when I was a new mom. So I think about trying to have compassion for self, right? But like all the ways that I messed up, because reframing it that way can also take some pressure off of parents too, and recognize that this is a learning. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have, but if you look at this as a learning opportunity, an opportunity for you that the universe has given you to learn more about yourself in concert with this other individual, this human, it can be really very freeing and take some pressure off. But of course, I was always striving to be the perfect mother, so I had all the mom guilt, I had all the things I'm doing wrong, and um, played those in my mind, which was counterproductive. But
But
yes,
we
I
do that,
truly,
right? We
yeah,
do that, Andrea, right? Like we automatically go to the guilt, right? The cup that's half full rather than the cup that's, the half empty cup rather than the cup
yeah,
that's, half full. Because if we were to look at the cup that's half full, what is the checklist of things that you do right? I'm sure it's bigger than the checklist of things that you have yet to figure out. But it's the other side. It's the two or three things that we don't get right that, we determine our value and our abilities on, instead of all of the other things that we've got right. Why? Because they're not in our conscious brain. It's the things that we don't get right that are in our conscious brain. And I feel that this is where, a lot of the work within our journey as humans is about not just understanding the conscious space that we live in, but what about the subconscious space that we live in? There's a lot
hmm
there
hmm
we've already learned. And that helps us then evolve into the higher being that we're meant to be, because then we start to tap into our superconscious. And
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
we need to identify truly who we're meant to be. I found that out to answer your question. What a long way to get there, but I'm going to answer the question. How I got there about balancing the two different cultures was, I started a company called Anokhi Media in 2002, which you mentioned off the top. And my task with that was to try and figure out how to provide value and support to other people from my community in North America, because I'd moved from England to North America to get married. And, what are those struggles? Having a sounding board, having a community where like-minded people who are struggling from these two, very differing cultures, and learning from each other, what have we figured out, and sharing it. And that's what that media was all about for me. As the community started to figure that out, I parallelly started to figure it out. And I think that's what's really helped me become the person I am today, is that constant, need to be the student of life. I figured this out, and I pat myself on my back and say, I've done this, right? This is great. I've created greatness for me, right? Now let's go to that next chapter of greatness. Why is it that we're always looking for greatness that never seems to, be in our present moment? Why is it that greatness can't be something that is constantly evolving? Like, we're always reaching greatness, but then there's another greatness to reach. Why is it that we're always looking for utopia and not realizing that we keep getting to utopia? It's just then the needle keeps moving to the next version of what that needs to be. Take that moment. Oh my God. I say this all the time to the women I coach. Take the moment to look at your life and see how truly great you are. Truly great what you've accomplished is. Because your ground zero is your ground zero. What you've built from there is nothing but greatness.
You said so many things in there that I want to pull out, but I think that us remembering our own sovereignty, right? And it really, how truly powerful we are. It's like almost like we will never know how truly powerful we are. And your path, which I think is so interesting and inspiring, is that your evolution, it sounds like, is almost one business at a time. It's like,
gosh,
your personal development and your growth, right? I'm the same. I'm that serial entrepreneur. It's like I didn't get into business on my own for that. By the way, I didn't know that was going to be a thing. I was just going to build a business, right? But how much you have to face yourself, your shadows, and your room for expansion is so equally, like, hugely important in terms of like leading to the success that you want to achieve, right? And so I love your story and the way that you can take this one business and you saw a need, you saw an opportunity, and then how that also helped you expand. And as you expanded, then you were able to step into the next thing, right? And I just think it's beautiful. And not everyone has that entrepreneurial like chutzpah, right? Not everybody's story is going to look like that. But everyone does have an invitation to expansion in their life, show up in certain ways, right? Like, and it's identifying, I think, like, I love helping people identify that moment in time, at the time that seemed super innocuous, ended up changing the way they saw something, or changing a perspective, or led to a new relationship that changed their life. And I think that's just, there's so much insight and magic in that. I love that.
You're absolutely right, Andrea. You just brought something to my mind that I have to share this with you, because I think that this may help some people out there, because we do this as women. We do this as humans, actually, but women especially. And that is where, that imposter syndrome, that limiting beliefs that I am not good enough, is such a load of crap. I just have to put it out there and tell you just that out. The reason is, through my media company, I had years of interactions with people at the highest level, Andrea, right? Politicians, prime ministers, presidents, sports personalities, celebrities, musical artists, like, billionaires, because in media, you get access to these people, right?
Sure.
And people who are successful understand the value of getting out there into community. So I've had a lot of access to speaking to these types of people. And the one thing that I've learned, and I want this myth to be busted forever, and that is, no matter how high the level is that a person is at, they still question themselves. They still wonder, am I good enough? They still have imposter syndrome. And the higher up the ladder you go, the more imposter syndrome, the more questions are being asked. And the reason why people are so successful at those levels is because they are constantly questioning their worth. So what are they doing by default? They are doing more actioning of things to answer that question for themselves. Okay, I'll get there once I get this degree. I'll get there once I get this promotion. I'll get there once Forbes is talking about me. I'll get there once I get 1 million people following me, right? But that mark never ends. It can't, because that's the journey of life, right? So if there's someone, if there's a woman out there that's listening or watching this, I really, really want you to understand that you will never, ever, ever get over imposter syndrome. You will never, ever get over limiting beliefs. It'll never happen, because that's the journey of life. Mm-hmm. What you do need to do is pat yourself on the back every so often and say, I did that. I did that. There is greatness in that. There is value in that. And then just keep moving the post that little bit further, but that little bit further that is realistic. That's the piece that people mess up on. They look at these high fluting ideas and they don't look at where they're at, and they have no plan of how to get there. Right. So that's one thing I teach, Andrea. I want to share that with you, is have that, one goal, that those two goals, right, that you want to accomplish in the year, right? Then look at, how do I get milestones from where I'm at? Like, what milestones do I need to hit to get to that goal? Then look at each of those milestones and create steps to get to each of those milestones. So you're never focusing on the goal. What you're focusing on is the step to get to the milestone, the next step to get to the next milestone. Before you know it, you've gotten to the goal. The people who are focusing on the goal without doing that will never get to that goal. It just simply won't happen, because without a strategy, without actioning that strategy from where you are, the reality of where you are, you'll never hit that goal. And if I can do it with an arranged marriage, with having a culture that told me I'm supposed to be someone and not my own person, with having a child that opened me up to the fact that I've got to figure it out, not having a business degree, not having a journalism degree, not having any celebrity ins, not having any corporate ins, but just creating it step by step and figuring it out. If I can do it and get here and have several businesses and still have imposter syndrome, so can you.
Yes, I love that. And I think I appreciate you saying that about imposter syndrome. That's so important. That nobody's immune to it. Male, female, like no matter how much money is in the bank or how much celebrity status you hold, that everyone carries that. We have that in common. I think what I would take it a step further, and even what I would love to see, particularly in communities of women, and I think this is getting better, but communities of women, I'm just thinking about like moms, for example. You've got the stay-at-home moms, and you've got working moms. That's an example, right, of sometimes we create community where we compare ourselves. And we all have imposter syndrome, and then we kind of make it worse for each other, when very counterproductive, when we're all of a sudden comparing what we have and the haves and have-nots within these communities. And I do think that in all the seasons of my life, and I know you've had many too, it's just you can learn to have compassion for people in a different circumstance. But I think we have some work to do there. I'm not sure that helps us in the end when it comes to overcoming that imposter syndrome.
You just said something so powerful that I want to kind of just step into it for a moment, if I can, Andrea. And that is, there are so many women's organizations out there, and sometimes being in them is counterproductive, because all people ever talk about is how much success they have in some of them, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a fearful place to be in, because you want to be in a community that actions you at wherever you're at in your point, is able to action you, provide resources, provide network, provide opportunities, right? For the real struggles in whatever stage you're at, which is something that WOMEL does really, really well. right?
Yes.
But I've been a part of some of the highest level of women's mastermind communities, and I've had to walk away from them because it's kind of like it's women on steroids that are trying so hard to beat men at their own game, when what I feel needs to happen is that we have to step into what innately makes us female and utilize those attributes to rise. Things like nurturing skills, emotional intelligence, right? You know,
Collaboration. Yeah.
collaboration. How to run a house is like running an empire, right? Women
Yes.
do that better than men. It's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that require the vulnerability that will require, and I think it's meant to, though. I think like to really get sharper at whatever it is you're doing or really overcome the real stuff, you have to be willing to talk about the real stuff. You have to be willing to talk about the real story about the real stuff in order to make these accountability communities or be able to support one another. We also have to be willing to just be raw. And that is difficult. That's not everyone can, feels like they can do that. We can all work on ourselves so we can get to a place of that. I recently joined a founders community, and I've only been in it for maybe a few months. And so I went to one of my first mastermind events. I think it was the second one in my mastermind group. So I barely know these people, right? I've seen them once, and I was going through some stuff. I mean, really serious stuff. And the assignment was like, we had 90 minutes together or 2 hours, like your biggest issue, lay it out there. And I did reluctantly. And what I got back from that community, wow. I mean, you really know that you're in concert with people who are in the trenches too. And our ability to meet each other in that place of vulnerability there's so much power in that when we can embrace it. But it's difficult, very difficult.
It's interesting because then there's also the flip side of that, right? And I want women to kind of really lean into looking at this when they go and join communities. There's the other extreme where it's kind of like a pity party. There's communities where there's so much woe is me going on that nobody actually ever gets any work done. So be cognizant of what your needs are. Like make a list of what those things are you need, and find communities that can actually help you check those off your list. If you're there just, to make friends, or you're lonely and all of those things, be honest with yourself that that's why you're there. So you're actually not going to get out of it the things that are on your list. And that's okay too, Andrea. It's okay to be in communities because you need emotional support or you need a friend. Because we are more and more, especially moms, are more and more isolated when we're stay-at-home moms than we are in any other environment. Because now with everything being online, even our kids' activities, etc., there's just so much that takes them into isolated environments that also takes away from your time to be with your kids as well. But that's a whole other show. But that's also a thing.
For sure. Oh my gosh. So I want to know, because I know that this is something some of our listeners have encountered too, and it's part of my story, is that kind of religious background, the cultural kind of patriarchal upbringing, and yet still having the itch to like create some of my own or do something, step into my own power in a way, which was difficult for me to navigate. And quite honestly, I'm still kind of navigating that. I'm curious for you, how did your family react to you? How have they accepted your path when you decided that this is not my future, this is my future? Like, talk to me about that. How did you go through that?
So the most difficult decision for me was to get a divorce. It was the most difficult thing for my family to be able to stomach, because my then husband, he checked off all the check marks. Successful dentist, same culture, same religion, same value systems, extremely well-mannered, like gave my parents the utmost respect. So, from the outside, what the heck could I want to give all that up for? And to be very honest, there was no drama in our, divorce. Even till today, we share businesses together. We have raised my son together. he paid for everything. I nurtured him. That was the
Mm-hmm.
relationship that kind of
Uh-huh.
stayed, if I'm to be perfectly honest. And it's really interesting because it was never a lack of respect that, made us go our separate ways. It was my need to expand my horizons as an individual and as a woman, which I couldn't do in the box of the marriage. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what the challenge was for me. Like
I, yes.
I have so much respect for my ex-husband. He's an incredible human. For anyone out there that feels that maybe like there's a drama thing that I'm hiding, there just truly isn't. Like at the right time, he would have been the perfect match for me. But I just wasn't ready for the marriage commitment because how do you get married to someone when you don't even know who you are? Like marry you first. That's what I always say.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, so good. No, it was so good. And in the fact that what a blessing too, that he was able to have enough respect for you making that choice to follow your own unique story, wherever that's going to lead, follow your heart and your intuition, what you're here for. It would be easy for him to just dismiss that as not being important because it violates the contract that the two of you had, right? And I don't know, and not for him, but I know that in some of my relationships, I think sometimes there's a loss for men. Sometimes the ego takes a hit. There's a they had someone managing the life that's no longer there. There's a lot of disruption there that he could have been very angry about. And
I'm sure he was, Andrea, to be very honest, because, he wanted this life.
yeah.
So, if I was to look back at it, I'm sure there was, sadness and anger and trauma and all
Hmm.
the things he went through that I never acknowledged because I was too busy dealing with my own. Like
Yeah.
I felt I was carrying so much baggage from my upbringing and from
Hmm.
my fear to fail as a mother that I didn't have room to think about how my decision was affecting him. To be very honest, in hindsight, I wish I had done it better, but I really was only thinking about myself.
Well, and I
I'm
think that's yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I think that I can relate to that. I mean, especially in my first divorce, I had little ones. It was a matter of survival, quite honestly, in my mind. What am I going to do? I wasn't allowed to work, which was part of the reason why the marriage didn't last. And here I am now starting over. I have nothing. I have degrees, but no work experience. And um, I think it's a matter of survival. And when I look back on those years too, I think, wow, I was so self-focused. I was so in my own head. And I mean, I wouldn't even go to the mailbox and open the mail for many, many weeks at a time because I just wanted to stay in this bubble that was me and my life and focused on. But that was survival, I think. I've looked back at that younger version of me and had to dig up that compassion for self of that there was also a whole lot going on at the time that was overwhelming, and sometimes
But
that's
you
all our brain
needed that,
can do.
Andrea. Like you needed that time to cocoon,
Yeah,
right? Like, that's the thing that a lot of people don't give themselves time. They feel like, oh, I've done this chapter. Now I've got to jump into the next chapter and I've got to get on with it. And other people do. So why am I kind of feeling like I'm at a stalemate? Well, because your being is telling you that you need to cocoon. There is a time to
right.
cocoon and there's a time to action. And
That's
you
right.
needed that and you listened to that. God bless. Like you listen to that, which is where I'm assuming you probably got a lot of answers because
Hmm.
in stillness, in quiet, you can hear the voices in your head really loudly. And when there's noise going around because you're actioning, you're constantly actioning, you're not hearing those voices. And I've coached women, Andrea, who've gotten to the latter part of their lives where they say, I never ever heard the voices until I stopped everything. And I
Hmm.
feel it's too late. But it's never,
Oh,
oh,
that
it's
breaks my
too
heart.
late, right? No, but it's
No,
never,
never,
oh,
never too late.
yeah.
Never too late. And I believe you when you say that because I think I took some time, but I didn't know why I was doing that. I think I was responding to something that my body needed, but I
Yeah.
wasn't also probably connected to spirit in the way that I am now. I mean, I thought I was in a religious way, in a different way, but I think what was I wasn't sitting to listen to the voice necessarily. was more of like to clear out all the drama, to maybe take a break from like all the drama, right? Which I suppose it's just
That's
another way of
good.
looking at it. But
Good.
now I'm like, gosh, so many moments in my life. If I knew then what I know now, if I had the practices in place that I do now, perhaps I would have learned some lessons a lot sooner, and maybe things would have clipped along faster. But
Well, this is your destiny, sweetheart, right? Like you always have to,
yeah.
And this is where we have to give ourselves as individuals, as humans, as self grace. We have to give ourselves grace that we have a speed and we have to listen to that speed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, these feelings matter. The emotions we have are data. If we can learn to maybe
Yes.
not react, but like sit with it for a second. Whoa, I didn't see that coming. What's that about? That practice of being able to, just be self-aware, and our stillness there's just so much power. Again, sovereignty, just how much how powerful we truly are. It's just, we barely know. It's just
Oh,
mind bending.
it's really interesting because, this was the big thing that Jesus talked about, right? Like, here he was born, in the Abrahamic philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
And here he was saying that, the God, the greatness, the God is within you. You are
Right.
God. You are God. God, because you are of God. Because you are of God, you are a piece of God. So if
Yes.
you are a piece of God, you have to work on finding the godness in you. Right. So this went totally against the Abrahamic
Mm-hmm.
philosophies where God is external. God is to be feared, right? And, you have to listen to these rules that you don't understand, but you have to follow them,
Yeah,
right?
it's a method of control. Sure. It's
Yeah. Whereas
a
Jesus was
method of control.
saying, and this
Mm-hmm.
is why they had to get rid of him, right? Jesus
Right.
was saying, you are liberation, you are freedom. If you were to tap into yourself and understand just truly how much greatness is within you, right? And all the meditation he did and all the stuff that he did to find those answers and realize that and that's what he was trying to teach everyone. Now I'm not
Mm-hmm.
religious. I'm not religious in the contextual sense of religion, but I've read a lot of scriptures, the Abrahamic religions, Jesus and his philosophy. Hinduism, which is what I was brought up in, Sikhi that I was brought up in. I've looked at Buddhism, is Islamic religions, and the ones that resonate to me are the ones that allow me to be liberated. That the journey of that philosophy is for me to find greatness in my liberation, right? So
Absolutely.
I feel, there is a lot to be learned from religion and from scriptures, right? It's just that I feel that you need to know how to read them.
Correct. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I
There's
joke.
value to history. There's
I
value to scriptures, right?
Absolutely. And I think now these days you have religious documents, but you have historical documents as well that go back to some of those time periods. And you have
Yeah.
new science coming out that are all starting to say the same thing, and much around,
Yeah.
what Jesus was teaching, and also the other masters, I
Yeah.
mean, I sometimes joke, because I was brought up, and many listeners know this already, that I was brought up in a very religious, fundamental kind of Christian, philosophy, and very
Before
strict.
Jesus,
And
which before Jesus would not be happy about,
well,
right? It's
I joke that I left Christianity to go follow Jesus. That's kind of what I did. Which a lot of times they look at me like cross-eyed, like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, trust me, it makes perfect
makes
sense.
sense. It makes
Perfect.
sense. It makes perfect sense because if Buddha, if Krishna, if Jesus, if any of these were alive today and they were to look at what's being done with their philosophies, they would be absolutely against what is being taught under in the guise of their name. Like I vehemently believe that.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
So
Oh,
thank God.
well, I mean, I love chatting with you. I love having these conversations. We could talk all day. We could talk for hours, I'm sure, Raj. Like,
Absolutely.
your story is so beautiful. It's so complex and multi-layered, but it all comes from this authentic place of your own personal journey. Like, your journey toward expansion is what I love about your story, because that has been the guiding kind of compass for you. And there's so much inspiration there for any other woman who finds herself in a moment of transition at any chapter in her life and feels like, I don't have the education for this. I don't have the experience for this. Other people are out there doing it already. I can't do this. I can't compete with that. Anyone who's even remotely thinking that, is your story is such a testament to how there is freedom beyond that thinking. And I just appreciate you so much and all that you're doing in the world today to encourage and provide insight for others. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Andrea.
And
I'm so honored. Thank you so much. I
oh,
appreciate.
yes, absolutely. And before we leave, please tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to find more about your work and what you're up to.
I feel that the simplest way for you to get hold of me directly is either go to my Instagram under my name, Raj Gurn, or go to LinkedIn again under my name, Raj Gurn. Every way that you could then, move forward in communicating with me, you can do right there.
Great. And we'll include those links in our episode notes so people have an easy way of getting to them. So thank you again, Raj, for taking the time with me today. This was wonderful, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I sincerely hope that, something that we talked about here landed with everyone that's listening, because we're all in it together. We really are. We're in it alone, but together. And I feel that's the distinction that we need to make. We are both. We are
Yes.
a community, but we're also an individual, and both matter equally.
Absolutely. I love that. Great. Well, on that note, thank you, Raj. And we'll have you on again soon.
I would love that.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode. If you'd like to explore what your life could look like when your business and life are aligned with what you're really meant to do, get a business audit. I'll personally review your business, look at your social accounts, and give you some precise direction on what's working and how to create even more impact and income. Simply go to AndreaDeLaCerda.com, navigate to work with me, and select the business audit. Again, that's AndreaDeLaCerda.com. Work with me and then select the business audit. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. That way more content like this can be shared with you as soon as new episodes drop. Thanks so much for joining again. See you soon. Take care.